It begins in silence. A pale morning hangs over the world like a half-remembered dream. Mist weaves between the trees, soft and slow, as if time itself has chosen to pause. A lone figure walks a forgotten path in a fog-laced forest. No map, no destination. Only the rhythm of steps pressed gently into the moist earth, like the pulse of something ancient, something inward. Each footfall echoes softly, not loud enough to be heard by others, but loud enough to awaken the self. The trees don't speak, but they know. They've seen this journey before. They've watched the brave and the broken pass through. Those who dared to leave behind the warmth of familiarity for the cold kiss of truth. The figure doesn't speak either, not because they have nothing to say, but because they are beginning to listen to something deeper. We were raised on noise, raised to believe that to be heard was to exist, that to be seen was to be real, that to be alone was a failure of character. Alone became synonymous with defect, with rejection, with being less. But what if the opposite is true? What if solitude is not the mark of the lost, but the sign of the seeker? Carl Jung warned of the persona, the mask we wear to survive the expectations of society, to belong, to be approved of, to be liked. But the longer we wear the mask, the more we forget the skin underneath. The figure in the forest walks further now. The trail narrows, the fog thickens. Somewhere behind them, faint echoes flicker, laughter, opinions, memories of crowded rooms. Familiar voices from a life they've begun to outgrow. These echoes are like ghosts, pleasant, haunting, and empty. We are told to stay with the herd, to think as they think, feel what they feel, doubt what they doubt. Nietzsche called this the herd instinct, the deep, unconscious pull to conformity, to safety, to sameness. But to rise, to become, one must first leave. One must walk alone. The forest changes, trees turn to stone, roots to ruins. The figure moves deeper into something older than language, a place before names, before masks, before roles. This is not nature. This is psyche. This is the descent within. A pool of still water appears, perfectly round, perfectly silent. The figure looks in, and the reflection does not smile. This is the moment of confrontation, not with the world, but with the self, the real self. The one beneath the filters, beneath the roles, beneath the ego's clever disguises. Jung called this the shadow. Everything you were taught to hide, everything that didn't fit the script of acceptability. Anger, desire, fear, truth, and yet, within the shadow lies power. Not the kind that dominates others, but the kind that liberates the soul. The mist begins to clear, but not fully. Clarity never arrives all at once. It drips, like morning dew from the leaves. There is no lightning bolt, no divine voice. Only the slow, painful peeling away of illusion. Schopenhauer once wrote that suffering is not an error, but the essence of life. That in suffering, we awaken to what matters. Not because it's pleasant, but because it pierces. The figure stumbles, then kneels. Not in defeat, in reverence. Pain is not the enemy, it is the threshold. The forest is not punishing, it is baptizing. There is beauty in this sorrow, a quiet, aching beauty. It doesn't demand attention, it simply is. Kierkegaard spoke of despair, not as weakness, but as necessity. As the soul's refusal to live falsely, as the starting point of becoming real. Real strength, he believed, comes not from triumph over others, but from inwardness. From standing naked before yourself and saying, yes, this is me. The darkness, the fire, the confusion, the longing, all of it me. The figure rises now, their faces still, their steps slower. But there is something new in their movement. Not certainty, but sovereignty. Not pride, but presence. They are no longer walking to be seen. They are not searching for applause. They are not seeking answers. They are simply walking, because the walk itself has become the point. Alan Watts once said, "The ego is an illusion, a ghost trying to solidify itself through attention. And the more we chase validation, the further we drift from who we really are. But in stillness, in solitude, the illusion fades. And what remains is real. This is not a film about loneliness. Loneliness is hunger. Solitude is choice. This is about a different kind of power. The quiet kind. The kind that doesn't scream. It's the kind that doesn't posture. The kind that needs no audience. It walks through fog. It kneels in silence. It listens. It burns. And it never looks back. The echo chamber of the herd. The screen flickers with images, smiling faces, filtered lives, applause loops, scroll, click, like, repeat. A kaleidoscope of sameness, dressed in different clothes. 1,000 voices shouting, none of them your own. You feel connected, but strangely unseen, surrounded, but quietly alone. Welcome to the echo chamber. Modern life is not a marketplace of ideas. It's a mirror maze. A labyrinth of reflections, warped, glittering, shallow. Every wall polished by other people's expectations. Every turn shaped by algorithms and approval. You look for yourself and only find fragments. A figure stands in this maze, eyes tired, lips smiling, but something underneath, cracking. The voiceover continues. Soft, calm, almost whispering. We are born into performance. From childhood, you learn that to be loved is to behave. To succeed is to conform. To survive is to please. The world doesn't ask who you are. It teaches you who to become. And so, piece by piece, you build a mask. Carl Jung called it the persona, the face we show the world, a necessary illusion, until it becomes a prison. Because the longer the mask is worn, the more it becomes fused to your skin. We scroll endlessly, not because we are entertained, but because we are hungry. Hungry for something real, something untouched by performance, something true. But truth is not found in applause. In the echo chamber, validation becomes a drug. Each like, each nod, each smile, a small hit of approval, momentary, hollow, addictive. You begin to depend on it. Then you begin to need it. Then you begin to fear its absence, and that fear, the quiet death of self. The figure in the maze walks deeper. Screens flicker around them, looping videos, curated smiles, synthetic laughter. They stop in front of a mirror. It doesn't reflect them. It reflects what others see. Not a soul, but a product. Not a human, but a brand, Jung warned. If you identify too long with the mask, you will forget the one who wears it. You become liked, but never known. Visible, but not seen. Loved, but only conditionally. It is a subtle kind of despair. The kind Kierkegaard spoke of. Not loud, not tragic, but slow, like the erosion of a cliff. The despair of never having been yourself. This is the paradox of the herd. It offers you belonging, but only if you betray your uniqueness. It gives you identity, but only if you adopt the uniform. Nietzsche called this the herd instinct, the primal urge to remain inside the comfort of the collective. And make no mistake, the herd does offer comfort. It gives you language. It gives you structure. It gives you meaning, even if that meaning is borrowed. But what it cannot give is truth. The figure wanders now into a darker part of the maze. The lights dim, the mirrors crack. The sounds soften. There is no applause here, no feedback. It's no performance, only silence. And in the silence, something unfamiliar begins to stir. A faint memory, a buried voice, self unshaped by others. This is what the herd fears most, the silence of solitude. Because in solitude, you meet the stranger you have always been, the parts you rejected, the feelings you silenced, the truths you ignored. Alan Watts once said, "The ego is terrified of disappearing because it is built entirely from noise." Silence is its undoing. The figure kneels, hands on the floor of the empty corridor, breathing for the first time. No one is watching. There is no one to impress, no script to follow, only breath and being. Schopenhauer believed that silence was sacred, not because it was peaceful, but because it revealed what noise tries to hide. In silence, you discover that the persona is not you, that the applause was never for you. It was for the version of you that fit the mold. And now, you are outgrowing it. Most people never leave the echo chamber. They live entire lives within reflections, never questioning, never leaving. Orbiting the herd like moons around a fading star, gravitationally bound by fear of exile. Because exile feels like death until you realize it's a birth, the birth of authenticity, the beginning of individuation. The first true act of strength is refusal, not rebellion, not anger, just a quiet turning away, a step into the wilderness of the self. It's not because it's easy, but because it's real. The figure stands, the maze behind them, the open dark ahead, no path, no promises, only the unknown. In the first honest step, you do not need to explain. You do not need to be understood. You only need to begin, 'cause power, the real kind, doesn't come from being seen. It comes from the courage to walk unseen, to walk alone, and to keep walking, even when no one claps. The cave of mirrors fade in, a narrow mountain path at dusk. The wind has died. The trees no longer whisper. The world is quiet, but not peaceful. A lone figure stands before a jagged rock wall, cracked open like the ribs of a dying beast. A cave yawns before them, deep black breathing. Not a cave of shadows, but of reflections. They step inside. The air is colder here, heavy with the scent of stone, silence, and forgotten things. The torch they carry flickers against the damp walls, revealing the first surface. A mirror, not glass, but something older, more merciless. It does not flatter, it does not forgive. It shows the figure, not as they wish to be seen, but as they are. Tired, small, uncertain, and beneath it all, wounded. This is the cave of mirrors, and it waits for everyone who dares to walk alone. Once you step away from the herd, away from the applause, the rituals, the comfort, you enter this space, a space where every performance falls away, where no one watches, no one claps, no one saves you from yourself. Here, silence is not empty. It is alive. It echoes, it reveals, it pierces. You begin to see yourself stripped of persona. No more smiles designed for approval. No more clever words crafted to be liked. It's just the raw, unedited self, the one you buried beneath acceptance. The ego, confronted with silence, begins to scream. It begs for distraction, for noise, for anything to avoid what's being seen. But silence doesn't care. It does not yield. The figure walks deeper. Mirrors appear on every wall, broken, stained, yet brutally honest. In one reflection, they see their anger. A rage once softened to seem gentle, now raging like fire behind calm eyes. In another, they see their hunger, not for food, but for meaning, for love, for recognition, for something real. And in yet another, they see the lies told to fit in, to be safe, to belong. They touch the mirror, and it does not shatter. They do. Carl Jung called this confrontation the shadow, the hidden aspects of the self we deny, because we were told they were unacceptable. But truth doesn't care about approval. It only cares about wholeness. The path to individuation, to becoming a true self, passes through this cave. It is not a spiritual bypass. It is not transcendence. It is descent into fear, into shame, to every part of yourself you swore you'd never face. Kierkegaard named it despair. It's not the despair of weakness, but the despair of wearing masks so long. You no longer know what lives beneath. It is not a disease. It is a rebellion. The soul's revolt against living falsely. This pain, this mirror, is not punishment. It is invitation to feel, to become. The cave deepens. The figure begins to sweat. The torch grows dimmer. Breath shortens. They pass a mirror that reflects not just their face, but their childhood. Moments they forgot. Moments they buried. A voice they silenced long ago returns. Small, scared, asking, "Is it okay to be me?" They fall to their knees, not in defeat, but in the sacred breaking that precedes transformation. This is not self-improvement. This is death. The death of illusion. It's a false identity of who they pretended to be. Nietzsche said, "He who fights monsters must take care not to become one." But what if the monster isn't outside you? What if it is you? Your fear, your envy, your ambition, your emptiness. You cannot kill it. You must face it. You must listen to it. You must integrate it. Only then can you walk out of the cave hole. Schopenhauer believed that suffering was not a mistake, but the fundamental texture of human experience, that pain was not to be escaped, but endured with clarity. In this cave, there is no shortcut, no hack, no bypass, only silence. And the slow, honest work of becoming. The figure stands again. Blood on their palms from crawling, tears dry on their cheeks. They look into the final mirror, and for the first time, they do not flinch. They do not criticize. They do not hide. They see. Not a perfect being. Not a saint. But a whole one. Flawed. Beautiful. Real. This is the beginning. The ego doesn't vanish here. It softens. The mask isn't destroyed. It's removed. Set down with reverence. Alan Watts reminds us, the ego is a social institution, not a biological reality. When the world is no longer watching, who are you? In this cave you remember, not as a theory, but as a felt truth, that your wholeness was never about being good or admired or followed. It was about being true. Most will never enter this cave. It will stay with the herd, because reflection terrifies them. But those who do, who walk through the fire of mirrors, they emerge not as gods but as humans. And in this age of plastic perfection, to be human is the most sacred rebellion of all. The abyss between worlds. Fade in, a desolate plateau at twilight. The air is still. Sky, ash-gray and endless. A low wind carries the scent of smoke. But there is no fire, only dust and the absence of sound. A lone figure stands at the edge of a cliff. Below nothing. Vast void. Dark, endless, unmoving. Not a hole in the earth, but a silence in existence. A pause between what was and what might be. This is the abyss between worlds. There comes a moment in every real transformation when the old no longer fits. The new has not yet arrived. You feel it not in your mind, but in your bones. Like waking up in a house you once called home and realizing the walls have no memory of you. Your friends still speak your name, but it echoes strangely. Your reflection still wears your face, but the eyes no longer recognize what stares back. You are not lost. You are unanchored. You are in between. Nietzsche warned us of the abyss, not as a place, but as an encounter. Confrontation with the terrifying truth that meaning is not inherited. It must be made. When you first leave the herd, you believe it is enough to walk away. You believe that solitude will save you. But solitude is not salvation. It is exposure. And here on the edge, you face something deeper than silence. You face the possibility that there is no ground beneath your soul. The figure looks down. The abyss doesn't speak. It watches. Not with malice, but with indifference. It does not care whether you jump, return, or kneel. It offers no guidance, no signs, no comforting myths. This is the dark night of the soul. What Kierkegaard called the moment of existential inwardness. When faith dies, but the hunger for truth remains. When you no longer believe in the stories you were told, but you haven't yet written your own. Here, doubt becomes a companion. Not loud, but constant. Follows you like a shadow that no longer needs light. You begin to question everything. Your past. Your choices. Even your pain. And yet, strangely, you do not despair. Not in the way you feared. Because beneath the despair, you feel something else. A strange, reluctant clarity. Like standing in the ruins of a temple and realizing it was never sacred, only familiar. Schopenhauer said suffering is the essence of life, not an obstacle, but the material of existence itself. Here, suffering no longer feels like punishment. It becomes language, a way of speaking with the soul. Pain teaches you what nothing else can. Not through cruelty, but through depth. You learn to suffer well, not as a victim, but as an artist. You take the ache, the silence, the longing, and turn it into brushstrokes. The void becomes a canvas, and your sorrow, its first color. The figure does not move. Not yet. They simply breathe. Every inhale, question. Every exhale, a letting go. You begin to unlearn. It's not who you are, but who you were never meant to be. The obedient one. The one who never asked too many questions. These identities fall away like dead leaves from a tree, no longer pretending it's still summer. You don't replace them. You sit with the naked branches, and in the stillness, nothing stirs. Alan Watts reminded us that the self we think we are is merely a pattern, a story, a trick of attention. And when that pattern dissolves, what remains is not a void, but presence. You become the space in which your suffering echoes. And then, slowly, you become the listener. In the abyss, nothing is certain. There are no guarantees, no final answers. Only the invitation to endure the silence without trying to escape it. Only the possibility that silence itself might be the answer. The figure steps back from the edge, not because they are afraid, but because they are no longer seeking escape. They turn inward, and the abyss does not vanish, but it changes. It becomes less like a cliff and more like a mirror, not one that reflects who you are, but one that reflects who you could become. Nietzsche spoke of the Bermensch, the one who creates their own values in the absence of inherited meaning. But this creation cannot begin until everything false has died. The abyss is not your enemy, it is your crucible. And to stand in it, to remain in it, is already a kind of transcendence. You are no longer who you were, and not yet who you will become. But for the first time, you are real, not defined, not finished, but honest, and present, and awake. This is not the end. It is the stillness before the beginning, the silence before the flame in the void. Darkness, not threatening, but vast, still, silent. The kind of darkness that hums. Somewhere deep within it, a faint flicker, a single point of light, barely there, not enough to see by, but enough to feel. Flame small, stubborn, warm. It doesn't shout, it doesn't beg for attention. It lives. There comes a moment, after the noise fades, after the identities fall, after the abyss has stared into you, when you feel it, not outside, within. A pulse, not of desire, but of truth. You don't discover it in the eyes of others. You don't uncover it through applause. You don't earn it. You remember it. A lone figure in a crumbling cathedral. The stained glass is shattered. The altar is gone. But in the center of the floor, a small flame dances. No one else sees it. No one else needs to, because it was never theirs to understand. Carl Jung called it the self, not the persona, the mask we wear for the world, not the ego, the fragile structure we defend at all costs, but the center, the eternal core, the part of you untouched by mirrors, and untouched by the crowd. It has no voice, because it is the voice, not the one you use to speak, the one that speaks you. This flame does not seek validation, it gives light. Even when no one watches, even when no one believes, even when you've forgotten how to believe yourself, it flickers quietly in the void, and yet it does not die. A storm howls outside a cave, winds scream, rain lashes the earth, trees break, rivers overflow. But deep inside the cave, the flame remains, not untouched, but unbroken. It bends, yes. It dances violently, but it endures. Nietzsche wrote of the Bermensch, the one who does not inherit meaning, but creates it, not in arrogance, but in fire. To create meaning is not a declaration. It is a sacrifice. It is the courage to light your own flame when the world offers only darkness. Not to be seen, but to see. We are taught to fear solitude. It's taught to believe that being alone means being incomplete. But Schopenhauer understood differently. He called solitude the wellspring of strength, not because it is comfortable, but because it strips away illusion. In solitude, the masks fall, the herd fades, it's the ego. Left without an audience shrinks, and something else begins to glow. A mirror lies shattered on the floor of a dim room. The figure stares at the fragments, each one reflecting a different mask, smiling, pleasing, performing. They kneel down not to pick up the shards, but to light a candle in their place. One quiet flame in the ruins of false identity. This is the paradox Kierkegaard wrote of, that despair, when faced without escape, becomes the door to inwardness. You don't overcome the void by escaping it. You illuminate it. Not all at once, not brightly, just enough to walk forward, Alan Watts often reminded us. The ego is an illusion, a whirlpool, pretending it is separate from the sea. When you stop clinging to what you thought you were, when you stop begging the world to name you, you begin to feel the current beneath it all. That current, the silent awareness, the unmoved mover within you, that is the flame. You don't control it, you allow it. You don't ignite it, you uncover it. The world will tell you to shine for them, to glow in a way that flatters their eyes, to burn just enough to be beautiful, but never enough to unsettle, never enough to change. But the real flame is not aesthetic, it is existential. It refuses to be tamed by approval or conformity, because its light isn't decoration, it's direction. A foggy path in a forest at night. The figure walks slowly, no torch in hand, just the flame within their chest. Subtle, steady, it doesn't light the entire way. Only the next step, that is enough. The strongest souls are not those who were celebrated. They are those who learned to burn alone, to live by an inner code even when the world had none to offer. They didn't wait to be understood, they didn't need to be followed. They simply became incandescent. In the end, this flame cannot be taught. It can only be remembered, and the remembering is not easy. It requires silence. It requires loss. It requires the long walk through shadow and doubt. But once seen, once felt, it changes everything. You no longer ask, who am I to shine? You ask, what happens if I don't? Because the world does not need more mirrors. It needs more fires. Fade to black. Lay the sound of breath. Then, a warm glow rising slowly, as if from the heart of the earth itself. Not a spotlight, a soul light, small, stubborn, unstoppable. The silence of the strong. There comes a time when you no longer raise your voice, not because you've lost the words, but because the noise outside no longer touches the stillness within. You walk through the world quietly now. Past arguments you no longer need to win. Past invitations to explain yourself, which you no longer feel compelled to accept. There is strength in your silence, but no pride, just peace, strength. Real strength is not dominance. It does not bark, does not clench its fists to prove itself. It does not demand to be seen. It is like a mountain in fog, unmoving, unseen by many, yet undeniable to those who truly look. You are not always this way, you remember. There was a time when you needed to be heard, to be known, to be validated. You tried to mold your truths into palatable shapes, soften your fire so it wouldn't tea-burn the hands of those who feared it. You wore your masks with grace, hoping someone might see through them, but they didn't. And over time, you stopped needing them too. Carl Jung called it individuation. The quiet death of the persona, the unraveling of every mask you wore to belong. And what is left when all masks fall? Not emptiness, but essence. You no longer shout your name into the crowd. You no longer chase applause. Your voice has turned inward, toward that deep, glowing silence where the self speaks without sound. Alan Watts once said, "The self is an illusion, a pattern of the mind clinging to itself. And when you stop clinging, when you finally let the illusion pass like smoke through your hands, you realize the need to be understood was the last chain of the ego." Now you sit in silence, not because you have nothing to say, but because you no longer need to explain what cannot be explained. You no longer translate your soul into language, you simply live it. And in this silence, you are not isolated. You are unentangled. You feel everything, but nothing possesses you. Not praise, not rejection, not even love. You walk beside people without becoming them. You give without expecting return. You love without gripping. You observe society without becoming its prisoner. You hear the songs of the herd, the cries for identity, the panic of the lost, but you no longer join their chant. Nietzsche warned of this herd instinct. The terrifying comfort in conformity, said. He who cannot command himself must obey. But now you command yourself. Not as a tyrant, but as a witness. You are no longer ruled by impulse or crowd or image. You walk through the marketplace of ego, where people sell pieces of themselves for attention, and you do not bargain. You walk alone, and yet you have never felt more whole. Solitude has stopped feeling like exile. It has become serenity. There is no longer a craving to be seen. You are not a billboard. You are a flame in the fog. Quiet, persistent. Untouched by the wind, Kierkegaard spoke of despair, that deep sickness of the self refusing to become itself. But once you pass through that despair, once you stop running from inwardness, you become something else. Not hollow, but rooted. Not loud, but indestructible. Schopenhauer in his Solitude called this the calm beyond desire, where the will stops thrashing and begins to dissolve. You now find joy not in control, but in release. You no longer own your art, you become it. You no longer pursue meaning, you embody it. You are no longer a prisoner of the herd. You are the mountain the herd walks around. They do not see you, not truly, but it does not matter, because you are no longer climbing to be noticed. You are rooted still, unshaken, and this silence is not absence. It is fullness, the kind of fullness that no applause can give, and no rejection can take away. The strong do not shout. They do not wave their hands. They do not decorate their power with noise. The strong are silent, because silence is the sound of someone who has nothing left to prove. And in that silence, there is peace. There is depth. There is freedom. You are not empty. You are vast. Walk alone. There are paths that wind gently through the crowd, well lit, paved with comfort and approval. On these roads, the faces smile, the voices echo with certainty. It is warm here, predictable, safe. But then there is another path. It is not offered. It is not shown. It's not taught. It calls. Softly at first, like a whisper beneath the noise of daily life. Then louder, like a storm behind your ribs. Not everyone hears it. Even fewer follow, because to walk it is to die. Not the death of the body, but the death of illusion. We will watch who you thought you were crack, splinter, dissolve. You will mourn the masks you wore so well, the ones that earned you applause, the ones that kept you safe, the ones that made you visible in the eyes of others. But then you will realize you were never really seen, only reflected. Carl Jung called this the first descent, the moment the persona begins to fracture, and through that fracture, the self begins to emerge. But it is painful, excruciating, because the first step to truth is betrayal of everything false that once felt like home. So you begin walking. It's not away from others, but toward yourself. And that feels like solitude. At first, you will look around and find yourself alone in a fogged forest of silence. Friends will fade. Conversations will lose their meaning. Your old world, once so vibrant, will collapse under the weight of its own illusion. This is not punishment. It is purification. As Schopenhauer knew, true solitude is not loneliness, but liberation from distraction. You do not walk alone because you must. You walk alone because you can. It is not exile. It is evolution. And with every step, begin to see, you are never truly alone. You are only buried beneath the expectations of others, their hopes, their fears, their image of you that you tried so hard to become. But you are not an image. You are not a role. You are not your reputation. You are not your reflection in their eyes. You are something older, deeper, wilder, as Nietzsche wrote. The individual has always had to struggle to keep from being overwhelmed by the tribe. And now, you no longer need the tribe to know you exist, because now, there is no longer a need to be understood. No hunger for validation, no thirst for recognition. And in that absence, a new presence emerges, still calm, unshakable. Alan Watts once said, "Trying to define yourself is like trying to bite your own teeth, and so you stop trying. You simply are." In this sacred aloneness, there are no performances, no scripts, no masks. You no longer live for the mirror. You no longer measure yourself by reaction. You no longer shrink to be liked or stretch to be seen. You exist, not as an echo, but as a source. The path is quiet now, not because you are lost, but because you've stopped asking for directions from those who've never left the village. You carry your own compass. You follow the stars not in the sky, but in your chest. Kierkegaard called it the inward journey, a leap not of logic, but of faith. Not belief in a doctrine, but faith in the silent truth that something within you knows the way. And though your steps may tremble, Your soul does not. There are ruins behind you now. Old versions of yourself, burned illusions, ghosts of who you were told to be. Let them fall. Let them fade. From this place of inward stillness, you do not hate the world. You simply no longer beg from it. You can love, but you do not attach. You can listen, but you do not obey the noise. You can exist among others without becoming them, because walking alone is not about being alone. It is about not needing others to carry your truth. It is about walking with your shadow and not flinching, about facing the abyss and not collapsing, about knowing your worth, not because someone told you, but because you found it beneath all the lies. So when the world asks you to return, to play the role, to wear the mask again, you smile, not with bitterness, but with clarity. Because once you've tasted the peace of aloneness, you will never trade it again for noise dressed as love. This is the peace that does not perform, the joy that does not need an audience. It's the strength that does not roar. This is the path. And to those who are ready, the call is simple. Walk alone, not because you must, but because you can.